Padre Pio looked at the woman kneeling behind the confessional screen, and what he saw made his face go pale. He did not greet her. He did not ask her to begin. Instead, he raised his hand and said two words that shattered her world. "Get out." She tried to speak. She opened her mouth to begin listing her sins, the way she had done every month for 30 years. But Padre Pio cut her off. He said, "I will not hear your confession, not today, not until you repair what your tongue has destroyed." And then he told her exactly how many souls she had wounded. 14. 14 souls, some of them people she saw at Mass every Sunday, people she smiled at, people she considered friends. 14 souls carrying scars that she had carved with nothing more than words spoken in kitchens, whispered after Mass, murmured over the telephone late at night when she thought no one was listening. But someone was always listening. God was listening, and Padre Pio could see every single wound. This is what truly matters, and I learned it the hard way. Years ago in my parish in Coventry, I was part of a small prayer group. Good women, all of us. We prayed the rosary together every Wednesday evening. But after the prayers, we would stay for tea. And during that tea, something happened that I am not proud of. We talked about other people, about the woman who left her husband, about the teenager who stopped coming to Mass, about the priest's housekeeper and her drinking. We called it concern. We called it prayer intentions. But if I am honest with myself, and I must be honest because Padre Pio demands nothing less, it was gossip, pure and simple. And I did not understand the spiritual damage I was causing until I read what Padre Pio said to that woman in the confessional, until I understood what he saw. And then everything changed for me. Now I need to tell you why this story is not just about one woman in an Italian village 60 years ago. It is about you. It is about me. It is about every Catholic who has ever opened their mouth and spoken a word about another person that they would not say to that person's face. Because what Padre Pio saw in that confessional was not just a personal failure. It was a spiritual mechanism, a process of destruction that operates invisibly every time a human tongue is used as a weapon. And once you understand how it works, you will never speak the same way again. The fear I want to address is one that most Catholics never think about. We worry about the big sins, the ones with clear names, adultery, theft, murder. We examine our consciences for these sins because they are obvious. They have edges. You know when you have committed them. But the sins of the tongue are different. They are soft. They are quiet. They blend into ordinary conversation so seamlessly that most people commit them daily without the slightest pang of conscience. And that, Padre Pio said, is exactly what makes them so dangerous. Because a sin you do not recognize as a sin is a sin you will never confess. And a sin you never confess is a sin that stays on your soul forever, growing roots, sending tendrils into every other area of your spiritual life, poisoning your prayers, blocking your communion with God, and slowly, silently turning your soul into something you would not recognize if you could see it. And Padre Pio could see it. He could see it the way you and I see colors. And what he saw on the souls of gossips terrified him more than almost anything else. The woman's name was Carmela Rossi. She lived in San Giovanni Rotondo, less than half a mile from the friary where Padre Pio celebrated Mass every morning. She was 61 years old. She had been a faithful Catholic her entire life. She attended daily Mass. She received communion every morning. She prayed the rosary, made novenas, kept the fasts, observed every feast day. By every external measure, Carmela Rossi was a model of Catholic devotion. Her neighbors pointed to her as an example. The younger women in the parish aspired to her piety, but Carmela had a gift, and I use the word gift the way the world uses it, not the way God uses it. Carmela could talk. She had a voice that drew people in, a warmth that made others feel safe, a way of asking questions that made you want to tell her everything. She was the person everyone confided in, the woman you told your troubles to because she seemed so understanding, so compassionate, so genuinely concerned about your life. And she was, in her way. Carmela genuinely cared about the people in her parish. The problem was what she did with the information they gave her, because Carmela did not keep secrets. She did not hold confidences sacred. Every piece of personal information that passed through her ears came out through her mouth, slightly modified, slightly embellished, wrapped in the language of concern and prayer, and delivered to the next willing listener with the efficiency of a postal service. When Maria told Carmela that her son had lost his job, by evening, 3 families knew about it. When Giovanna confided that her husband was drinking again, by the next morning it was discussed in whispers outside the church. When old Signora Bianchi admitted that her grandson had gotten a girl pregnant, by the end of the week the entire neighborhood knew, and the girl's family was in disgrace. Carmela never thought of herself as a gossip. She would have been genuinely shocked and deeply offended if anyone had called her one. She was sharing prayer intentions. She was asking for advice on how to help. She was being a concerned member of the community. The words she used were always gentle, always compassionate, always framed as care. She never raised her voice. She never said anything cruel. She simply told other people's secrets to the world, one conversation at a time, and watched as the consequences unfolded without ever connecting them back to herself. But Padre Pio saw the connection. Padre Pio saw everything. The day Carmela came to confess was a Tuesday in September of 1961. She had been confessing to Padre Pio for years, always listing the same small sins: impatience, distraction during prayer, missing her morning devotions once or twice. She had never once confessed the sin of gossip, not because she was hiding it, but because she genuinely did not believe she was guilty of it. In her mind, sharing information about people you care about is not gossip, it is community. It is the way women have always supported each other. It is how you know who needs prayers, who needs help, who needs a visit. And that is exactly the lie that the devil uses to turn the human tongue into a weapon of spiritual destruction. Hold on, because what Padre Pio told Carmela that day in the confessional goes far beyond a simple rebuke for talking too much. What he revealed to her about the invisible consequences of her words is something that the Church rarely teaches. Something that most priests do not fully understand, and something that, once you hear it, will change the way you think about every conversation you have for the rest of your life. When Padre Pio refused Carmela's confession and told her to get out, she did not leave immediately. She knelt there, frozen, unable to process what was happening. No priest had ever refused to hear her confession. The very idea was incomprehensible to her. She had been confessing to Padre Pio himself for years. He had always been kind to her. He had always given her absolution. What had changed? Everything had changed, because on that particular Tuesday, Padre Pio had been granted a vision. Not a vision of the future or of heaven or of hell, but a vision of the invisible present. He could see, as clearly as you see the screen in front of you right now, the spiritual reality of what Carmela's tongue had created over the course of 30 years. And what he saw was horrifying. He described it to her later, after she had completed the penance he assigned and returned for confession weeks afterward. He told her that when she knelt behind the screen, he could see her tongue, not her physical tongue, her spiritual tongue. And it was black, not dark, not gray, black like charcoal, like ash, like something that had been burned from the inside out. And from that blackened tongue, he could see threads. Dark threads, thin as spider silk, stretching out from her mouth into the distance, each one connected to another person's soul. 14 threads, 14 connections. 14 souls that her words had wounded, some recently, some years ago, but all of them still bearing the marks. He told her that each thread was a different color, depending on the nature of the wound. Some were red, the color of anger, where her words had caused rage and conflict between people who had previously been at peace. Some were green, the color of envy, where her words had planted jealousy in hearts that had been content. Some were gray, the color of shame, where her words had exposed secrets that were never hers to share, leaving people stripped of their dignity before their neighbors. And some, the worst ones, were a deep, almost invisible violet, the color of despair, where her words had caused someone to lose hope, to withdraw from the community, to question their worth, to wonder if God himself had abandoned them to public humiliation. 14 threads, 14 wounds, and every single one of them was still open, still bleeding in the spiritual world, still causing pain that Carmela could not see and the victims themselves could not explain, because that is the nature of the wounds caused by gossip. The victim knows something is wrong. They feel the pain. They sense the shift in how people look at them, the way conversations stop when they enter a room, the subtle change in tone when their name is mentioned. But they cannot point to a wound. They cannot show you a scar. The damage is invisible, which makes it both more painful and more difficult to heal than any physical injury. Few Catholics know this, but the Catechism of the Catholic Church addresses this directly. In paragraphs 2477 through 2479, the Church identifies 3 specific sins of the tongue. The first is detraction, which means revealing another person's faults and failings to someone who did not know about them, without an objectively valid reason. The second is calumny, which means telling lies about another person that harm their reputation. And the third, the one most people overlook, is rash judgment, which means assuming as true, without sufficient foundation, a moral fault in another person. Now here is what most people miss. Detraction is a sin even when what you say is true. Let me say that again because it is absolutely critical. Speaking the truth about someone's faults to people who have no need to know is a sin. Truth is not a defense. If your neighbor committed adultery 5 years ago and has since repented, confessed, and been reconciled with his wife, and you tell this fact to a newcomer in the parish because you think they should know, you have committed the sin of detraction. Even though every word you said was factually accurate, the truth of the statement does not justify the damage it causes, and the damage in the spiritual world is real, visible, and devastating. Padre Pio understood this with a clarity that came from seeing it directly. He did not need to read the catechism to know about the sins of the tongue. He could see the consequences with his own eyes, and what he saw on Carmela Rossi's soul was the accumulated damage of 3 decades of detraction, delivered with a smile, wrapped in concern, and never once confessed. But here is where the story takes a turn that reveals something even more terrifying about the sins of the tongue. Something that Padre Pio explained to Carmela during her penance, and something that I believe every Catholic alive needs to understand. The damage does not stay with the victim, it returns to the speaker, multiplied. Padre Pio called it the echo. He said that every word spoken about another person in secret creates an echo in the spiritual world. That echo travels outward from the speaker to the victim, causes its damage, and then returns. But it does not return at the same volume. It returns louder, stronger, carrying with it not just the original sin of the speaker, but the pain, the anger, the shame, and the despair of the victim. And when it arrives back at the soul of the gossip, it deposits all of that accumulated suffering like sediment on the floor of a river, layer by layer, year by year, until the soul of the gossip is buried under a weight so enormous that no ordinary confession can lift it. This is why Padre Pio refused to hear Carmela's confession. It was not punishment, it was not cruelty, it was the opposite. It was mercy. Because if Padre Pio had simply heard her confession as usual, if he had listened to her list of small sins and given her absolution, the absolution would have been valid, but incomplete. It would have forgiven the sins she confessed, but it would not have touched the mountain of unconfessed damage that was crushing her soul. Because she did not know it was there. She had never confessed the sin of gossip because she had never recognized it as a sin. And you cannot confess what you cannot see. So Padre Pio had to make her see. He sent her away with specific instructions. He told her to go home and write a list, every person she could remember speaking about to someone else, every confidence she had broken, every story she had shared, every reputation she had damaged, even slightly, even with the best of intentions. He told her to take as long as she needed, a week, a month, however long it took to be thorough. And he told her that until that list was complete, until she had looked at the full scope of what her tongue had done, she was not ready to confess. Because a confession that does not include all mortal sins of which the penitent is aware is not a complete confession, and Padre Pio would not administer an incomplete sacrament. Carmela went home in a state of shock. She sat at her kitchen table that evening with a blank piece of paper and a pen, and she began to write. She expected it would take an hour, maybe 2. It took her 3 weeks. 3 weeks of remembering, 3 weeks of faces appearing in her mind, conversations surfacing from years past, moments she had completely forgotten that came rushing back with terrible clarity. The time she told her sister about Rosa's husband losing their savings in a bad investment. The afternoon she mentioned to the women at the market that Giovanna's daughter had been seen with a married man. The evening she informed her prayer group that Father Antonio's housekeeper had a brother in prison. Piece by piece, conversation by conversation, the list grew. And with every name she wrote, Carmela felt something she had never felt before. Not guilt exactly, something deeper, horror. The slow, creeping horror of a person who realizes that she has been causing destruction for 30 years without knowing it. That she has been wounding people she loved with the same mouth that prayed the rosary. That her tongue, the same instrument she used to receive the body of Christ in Holy Communion every morning, had been simultaneously serving as a weapon against the body of Christ in his members. When the list was finally complete, it contained 47 names. 47 people whose lives, reputations, relationships, or peace of mind had been affected by words that came out of Carmela Rossi's mouth. 14 of them, the ones Padre Pio had seen, were the most seriously damaged, but the full scope of the destruction was nearly 4 times larger than even Padre Pio had shown her. And here is the part that breaks my heart. When Carmela looked at that list, she recognized something that shattered the last illusion she had about herself. Every single name on that list was someone she genuinely cared about. She had not gossiped about strangers. She had not spread rumors about enemies. Every person she had wounded was someone she loved, or at least someone she considered part of her community, her family, her parish. The gossip had not come from malice. It had come from closeness, from intimacy, from the very relationships that were supposed to be sacred, and that is exactly what Padre Pio meant when he spoke of the most dangerous temptation. The temptation that comes disguised as love. The same tongue that says I love you can destroy a reputation. The same mouth that prays Hail Mary can spread calumny. The same voice that sings hymns on Sunday can whisper poison on Monday. And the devil, Padre Pio said, delights in this more than in almost any other sin, because it turns the instruments of love into instruments of destruction. It corrupts the very bonds that God designed to hold communities together. It makes the church, which is supposed to be a hospital for sinners, into a courtroom where everyone is on trial. By ignoring the power of her words, Carmela was ignoring God himself, because God is the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Words are not trivial. They are not meaningless. They carry the fingerprint of their creator. And when we use them to destroy, we are desecrating something sacred. We are taking the gift of speech, the gift that separates us from the animals, the gift that allows us to pray, to confess, to declare our love, and we are using it to tear down what God has built. Every act of gossip is a miniature crucifixion, Padre Pio said. You are nailing a person's reputation to the cross, and unlike Christ, they cannot rise again from the death of their good name without extraordinary grace. When Carmela returned to Padre Pio with her list 3 weeks later, she was a different woman, not outwardly. She still looked the same. She still wore the same black dress, the same rosary around her neck, the same worn shoes. But something in her eyes had changed. Padre Pio saw it immediately. He said later that the blackness on her spiritual tongue had begun to lighten. Not because she had been absolved yet, but because she had done something even more fundamental. She had seen the truth. She had looked at the full scope of her sin without flinching, without excusing, without minimizing. And the act of seeing itself, the act of honest self-examination, had already begun the process of healing. Padre Pio heard her confession that day, the full confession, every name, every story, every broken confidence, every reputation damaged. It lasted nearly 2 hours. Other penitents waiting in line grew restless. The friars wondered what was happening behind that screen. But Padre Pio gave Carmela every minute she needed, because this was not an ordinary confession. This was the dismantling of 30 years of spiritual damage, one thread at a time. And then he gave her a penance that shocked her. He did not assign prayers. He did not tell her to say 100 rosaries or make a pilgrimage or fast for 40 days. Instead, he told her to go to each of the 14 people whose souls he had seen most damaged by her words. Go to them one by one, look them in the eyes, and tell them what she had done. Not in general terms, not vaguely, specifically. Tell them exactly what she had said, to whom she had said it, and when. And then ask for their forgiveness, not God's forgiveness. She would receive that in the confessional, but the forgiveness of the people she had wounded, because, Padre Pio said, God forgives the sin, but the wound remains in the other person's soul until they choose to forgive the one who caused it, and asking for that forgiveness is not optional. It is part of the repair. I can only imagine what that felt like for Carmela, standing on the doorstep of someone whose secret you revealed to the entire neighborhood, looking into the eyes of a woman whose marriage was nearly destroyed by something you said casually over tea, sitting across the table from an old friend who stopped speaking to you years ago and now understanding why. It must have been the most humiliating, terrifying, liberating experience of her life. It took her 4 months, 4 months of visits, of tears, of doors slammed in her face, of long silences, of painful conversations. Not everyone forgave her. 3 of the 14 refused. They could not. The wounds were too deep, the damage too lasting. And Padre Pio told her that she must accept their refusal with grace and continue to pray for them, because forced forgiveness is no forgiveness at all. And only God can soften a heart that has been hardened by betrayal. But the 11 who did forgive her, those 11 encounters changed something in the spiritual fabric of that parish that was visible even to people who had no mystical gifts. The women who had been cold to each other for years began speaking again. Families that had been divided by whispered rumors found their way back to shared meals. A heaviness that had hung over the parish of San Giovanni Rotondo, a subtle darkness that no one could name but everyone could feel, began to lift, because the threads were being cut, one by one, conversation by conversation, tear by tear. The spiritual connections that Carmela's gossip had created, those dark threads that Padre Pio had seen stretching from her tongue to 14 wounded souls, were being dissolved by the only force powerful enough to destroy them: forgiveness. When Carmela completed her penance and returned to Padre Pio one final time, he looked at her and smiled. One of the few smiles that witnesses remembered from Padre Pio in the confessional, which was usually a place of great severity. He told her that her spiritual tongue was no longer black. It was pink, like a newborn's, clean, fresh, ready to begin again. And he told her something that she repeated to everyone she met for the rest of her life. Something that I believe is one of the most important things Padre Pio ever said about the spiritual life. He said the tongue is the only organ in the body that can both receive Christ and betray him in the same hour. Guard it as you would guard the Eucharist itself. Think about that. The same tongue that receives the body of Christ in Holy Communion, the same physical organ that touches the sacred host, that holds the precious blood. That tongue, within minutes of leaving the church, can be used to destroy another member of Christ's body. It is the ultimate paradox, the ultimate test of integrity, and most Catholics fail it every single day without realizing what they are doing. Now let me give you something practical, because understanding the spiritual reality is essential, but it means nothing if you do not change your behavior. And changing a habit of speech that has been with you for years, possibly decades, is one of the hardest things a human being can do. Padre Pio gave Carmela a practice that she followed for the rest of her life, and I have followed it myself since I learned about it, and I can tell you from personal experience that it works. He called it the 7-day tongue fast, and it is exactly what it sounds like. For 7 consecutive days, you commit to the following discipline. Before you speak about any person who is not present in the room, you ask yourself 3 questions. First, is what I am about to say true? Not probably true, not mostly true, completely, verifiably, absolutely true. If you are not certain, you do not say it. Second, is it necessary? Does the person I'm speaking to need this information for a legitimate reason? Not curiosity, not entertainment, not bonding over shared disapproval, a genuine, concrete, practical reason. If there is no such reason, you do not say it. Third, is it kind? Even if it is true and necessary, will saying it serve the good of the person being discussed? Or will it diminish them, expose them, or cause them harm? If it will cause harm and there is no proportionate reason to speak, you do not say it. 3 questions: true, necessary, kind. All 3 must be answered yes before you speak about another person. If even one answer is no, you remain silent. This sounds simple. It is not. When you first attempt the 7-day tongue fast, you will discover something shocking about yourself. You will discover how much of your daily conversation consists of talking about other people. You will find yourself opening your mouth to say something and then stopping because you realize it fails one of the 3 tests. You will sit in silences that feel uncomfortable because the thing you want to say, the interesting piece of information, the funny story, the concerned observation, does not pass through the filter. And in those silences, you will begin to understand what Padre Pio understood. That most of what we say about other people serves no purpose except to make ourselves feel important, informed, or connected. And the price of that feeling is paid not by us, but by the people we talk about. During the first 2 days, you will fail repeatedly. You will catch yourself mid-sentence, already revealing something you should not reveal. Do not despair. Simply stop. Acknowledge the failure internally and begin again. By the 3rd day, something begins to shift. The reflex weakens. You start to notice the moment before the words form, the instant of choice where you can turn towards silence or towards speech. That moment of awareness is the beginning of spiritual freedom. By the 5th day, you will notice something else. Your relationships begin to change. People trust you more. They speak to you more openly. They sense, without being able to explain it, that you are safe, that their words will not travel beyond the room, that their confidences are truly held in confidence, and that trust, that sacred trust between two human beings, is one of the most beautiful gifts you can give another person. It is, in a very real sense, a reflection of the trust God shows us in the confessional. He hears our worst secrets and tells no one. The priest, bound by the seal of confession, hears our worst failures and takes them to his grave. And we, in our small way, can offer the same gift to the people in our lives, the gift of a sealed mouth, the gift of a tongue that receives secrets and keeps them. By the seventh day, if you have been faithful to the practice, something extraordinary happens. The filter becomes automatic. You no longer need to consciously ask the three questions. They become part of the way you think. The reflex to share information about other people weakens to the point where it feels unnatural to do so. And in its place, a new reflex emerges. The reflex to protect, to shield, to cover the faults of others with silence the way you would cover a wound with a bandage. And that reflex, Padre Pio said, is one of the marks of a soul that is growing in holiness. After the 7 days, you maintain the practice. It becomes a permanent part of your spiritual life, like the rosary or the examination of conscience. And every time you catch yourself, every time you feel the pull of gossip and choose silence instead, you are doing something invisible but profoundly real. You are cutting one of those dark threads that Padre Pio saw. You are refusing to create a new wound. You are choosing, in that small moment, to be an instrument of healing rather than an instrument of destruction. You have just learned something that most Catholics will go their entire lives without hearing: the spiritual reality of gossip, the mechanism by which words wound souls, the vision that Padre Pio was granted of the invisible damage caused by ordinary conversation. And you have been given a concrete practice, tested by Carmela Rossi and taught by Padre Pio himself, to begin repairing the damage your own tongue may have caused. This channel exists to bring you these hidden truths, the testimonies that were never published, the spiritual teachings that were shared only in whispered conversations between Padre Pio and his spiritual children. Decades of research, prayer, and discernment go into every video, and if this truth reached your heart today, if you feel something shifting inside you right now, then I want you to know that you can be part of this mission. The super thanks button below is not just a donation. It is a declaration that these truths matter, that the spiritual teachings of Padre Pio deserve to reach every Catholic soul that is hungry for them. You are not just supporting a channel. You are supporting the continuation of Padre Pio's mission to repair the invisible world one soul at a time. And he promised that those who spread divine truth will be protected by divine truth. Carmela Rossi lived for another 17 years after her encounter with Padre Pio in that confessional. She died in 1978, 10 years after Padre Pio himself. And those who knew her in her final years said she was the quietest woman in San Giovanni Rotondo, not silent, not withdrawn, but careful, deliberate. Every word she spoke was measured, weighed, considered. She became known not as the woman who knew everything about everyone, but as the woman who could keep any secret, the woman you could trust with your life, the woman whose tongue had been transformed from a weapon into a shield. At her funeral, the priest who delivered the homily said something that everyone in that church understood, even though he never mentioned the story of her confession with Padre Pio. He said that Carmela Rossi had learned the hardest lesson a Catholic can learn, that the road to holiness does not run through grand gestures and dramatic sacrifices. It runs through the small, invisible choices we make with our mouths 100 times a day, in kitchens and offices and church parking lots. The choice to speak or not to speak, the choice to reveal or to protect, the choice to use the tongue as a sword or as a prayer. And Carmela, he said, had chosen prayer every day for the last 17 years of her life, and the parish was holier because of it. Right now, I want you to think about your own tongue, not with guilt, not with shame, with honesty. Think about the last week, the conversations you had, the things you said about people who were not in the room, the information you shared that was not yours to share, the stories you told that might have been true but were not necessary and were not kind. And then make a decision. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. Commit to the 7-day tongue fast. 3 questions before every word about another person. True, necessary, kind, all 3, or silence. 7 days, starting tonight. And if you want to seal that commitment, if you want to make it real, then do what Carmela did on the day she completed her penance. Pray the prayer that Padre Pio taught her. The prayer he said every Catholic should pray before speaking. It is only 3 lines, but it carries the weight of eternity. Lord, place a guard over my mouth. Keep watch over the door of my lips. Let no word pass from me that wounds another soul. Amen. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever spoken about someone behind their back and later realized the damage it caused? Have you ever been the victim of gossip and felt those invisible wounds that no one else could see? Share your story in the comments below, because your honesty might be the very thing that helps another person recognize what their tongue has been doing. Type the word guard if you are committing to the 7-day tongue fast starting tonight. And share this video with someone you love, because the person who needs to hear this most is often the person who would never search for it on their own.